Hi, Matuhuramnige, and welcome to Venconmige. So let me start with an update first. Update number one. Looks like I am getting into the flow of this freelance writing thing, but it also made me kind of miss this week and last week's video. So hopefully I can keep making that money while still having time to make YouTube videos. I am making a little bit of money, really not much at all, but so far it has been sustainable enough to keep me here. I have been digging into my last paychecks from my last job working in the US, but the house is still being built and I am finishing paying off some credit card debt that I've had for a while. So after those two things are done, the amount of money that I spend here won't be much at all. It looks like my move so far is pretty sustainable. Another update is that some of the family took me on a little day trip to a world famous resort with hot springs called Las Grutas de Tolantongo. Tolantongo is a regional park where you will find grutas or caverns, hot springs, tunnels, and a river with thermal water, plus pools, regional food, and some hotels. The name Tolantongo comes from the name that it's been called by indigenous folks in the region for centuries now, which is Tonaltonco. I'm not sure if I am pronouncing it right, but it's a name in Nahuatl that means place where it feels warm. We got there by car because it is pretty close to my house, and we took the shortcut in the mountains and hills instead of using the main road. It was very foggy, and at one point, the ecosystem changed from the chaparral that I'm used to seeing around here to some pine trees and forests. I didn't bring my dry bag for my cell phone, so I couldn't take that many social media worthy pictures. But if you're interested in seeing some of the pictures, follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Venconmige. From what I understand, before these hot springs were a worldwide tourist attraction, they were considered a spiritual and medicinal place. So I took some pictures for Instagram, and I also got to see a coatimundi or coati or tejon for the first time in the wild, and that was really cute.
Está ahí, de aquí se ve muy bien. Ah, sí, 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 sí.
If you're planning to go to Tolantongo anytime soon, make sure you bring your cell phone drive bag and your water shoes, and make sure you have enough money to buy food. Food is a little bit more expensive there than the surrounding areas, or make sure that you bring your own food and supplies to cook with. You could also rent a room at the beautiful hotels or rent a tent and camp there. And of course, always remember that right now is the rainy season, which means that landslides are, always a possibility. In the future, I'm thinking of giving my supporters a chance to stay at my house when they're visiting the local tourist attractions. So keep an eye out for that. And of course, remember to respect the place and the people. And remember that first and foremost, this is a sacred and medicinal place for Nahuatl and Yañus indigenous folks. The main topic that I wanted to talk about today is why I don't identify as a Chicano. Previously, I made a video about my identity and how I think everyone should self-identify based on our own histories and experiences. Basically, you should identify how you want. I'll leave a link to that video. So I want to start off with a big spoiler about this video and that previous one as well. I don't think the Chicano identity is a bad identity to have. Again, people should identify according to their own experiences. And I also want to admit that I don't have a lot of academic experience about the Chicano movement. I know the basics, which I'm sure you can research on your own, and also have worked and will always continue to work with Chicanos on issues that have to do with social justice. And I don't necessarily believe that I am not a Chicano. I just think that for me, my identity needs to be more specific, and here's why. So I grew up knowing that I was Mexican. My parents are first generation immigrants to the United States, and they wanted to instill a sense of pride in us about our roots and mostly their nationality. As I was growing up, I knew that I wasn't white and I knew that I wasn't Spanish either. Many people know this already, that many Mexicans have a mixture of Spanish and indigenous ancestry. I also knew that my dad spoke a different language other than Spanish, a language called Ñañú. But I didn't even think about what it meant to know a language like that at the time. But as I grew up and I started going to college, I started thinking about it more. I was getting politically involved and I started kind of separating my identity from Mexican nationalism. And I was learning a lot through classes on Native history. I would talk to professors, and one thing that I thought was interesting is that they didn't know what my background was, what Otomi or Ñañú was, which is okay. Not everyone can know everything, and there are so many cultures in the continent of America. But it sent me looking for more answers. Even as I took a class on Mesoamerican history, I didn't really see any information about Otomi people. There was all this talk about these amazing civilizations and the mystery of who must have lived there. And they could be talking to the descendants of those very people who live in those very same cities now. No mention of who we are now in the present. There's a huge difference between who the Otomi folks are now and who our ancestors were 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, just as there is a huge difference between the languages of like Spanish and French now and the the ancestral languages of like Latin, for example. The answers I was looking for was with getting to know other people like me, indigenous people from Latin America, or more specifically from Mexico. So I started joining some Chicano movements and groups, and it was a really formative experience. I definitely felt more at home as I talked with people about our shared experiences of being indigenous and immigrants or children of immigrants at the same time. I began to see a pattern that many folks in these circles focused on the history of the Aztec Empire, or what people consider the great civilizations of Mesoamerica. And people focused on learning classical Nahuatl instead of thinking of the languages that people speak today. In fact, one time at a gathering with indigenous folks from all across of the American continent, somebody said, I am Mexican, which means that I am Aztec or Mayan. And it is easy to forgive folks for not knowing a lot of our background. For Mexicans, as with many oppressed folks, there has been a lot of erasure. We can go back and talk about the founding of Mexico with the Spanish destroying indigenous cities, infrastructures, political systems, schools, the burning of our books. But one issue too is that many people see the day that Moctezuma fell as the moment when we lost contact with our indigeneity. But that is not when colonization happened. This process has been ongoing since then for 500 years. Through generations, indigenous folks have held on to a lot of our belief and culture, including our indigenous languages. This is a good time to point out again that there are 68 recognized indigenous languages in Mexico. And that means that if there are 68 languages recognized by the government, then there are probably more. But the people of Mexico have been speaking these languages for the past 500 years, even as our parents and their parents have faced discrimination for their indigeneity. And of course, for this reason, many in each generation make the decision to stop speaking their languages and not pass it down to their kids. And once indigenous folks from Mexico move to the United States, that assimilation is twofold. It's not enough to turn our backs on our indigenous language. We have to give up Spanish too. This may be why my dad thought to instill a sense of pride in our Spanish, but forgot to teach us about our indigenous language. Of course, the thing I love about Chicanismo is the wish to hold on to that ancient tradition, wisdom, and knowledge. In some cases, though, it seems that the need for solidarity in the pan-indigenous struggle made us overlook our individual histories as people from hundreds and thousands of indigenous lineages. I think that there is still a lot of dialogue and healing that needs to happen. That is why it is important for me to be clear about who I am. Yes, I am Chicano. Yes, I am Latinx. But more specific than that, I am Ñañú. If you want to support my move to Mexico, my journey to learning my language, and want to see more of these videos, please subscribe to my channel. Share this video with anyone you think would find it interesting. Leave a comment, ask a question about my move to Mexico, or let us know in the comments your story of reconnecting with your roots. Do you identify as Chicano? What are your roots? Check the links in the description bar, and thank you for those who have donated. Ginsu Hu, cuídense, and take care.